Well, good evening, everybody. Glad we're here. Looking forward to just another good evening, and I hope it's been a great week for everybody. These are the times I really just love the Bible studies. I love just being together and being in the Word. So we're continuing our journey through Ruth, and Ruth is a short book. It's only 4 chapters. So we're over halfway through, and depending on how far we get tonight, we'll only be in it another week or two, and then we're going to pick right up into Esther. So to me, the books go kind of hand in hand. They're two very powerful stories. So so we're picking up, and we're in the kind of toward the end of chapter 2. Remember, as we talked about last week, Ruth had been gathering grain. She had been supplying, really just trying to get food so she and Naomi would be able to eat. And she had an encounter with Boaz, and there was just some talk there, and really spoke to each other's heart. And Boaz just really spoke to her in such a way, and he talked to her, and then he invited her to eat with them. And then after eating is where we're going to pick up in verse 15, and it says in verse 15 it says, when she got up to gather grain, Boaz ordered his young men, let her even gather grain among the bundles, and don't humiliate her. Pull out some stalks from the bundles and leave them for her to gather. Don't rebuke her. So Ruth gathered grain in the field till the evening. She beat out what she had gathered, which was about 26 quarts of barley. Boaz is really here. You really got to just step back and see what's really going on here. Who is this woman? Who's Ruth? We know she's a foreigner, right? Even though she has some connection with Naomi. Okay, and obviously because of what Boaz had said earlier in the chapter, he recognized that. She's still a foreigner. She's still really, even though there's a connection there, there's not a legal bond there, if you think about it. Okay, the marriage, once Naomi's son died, where's the familial connection? It's broken. Really, Ruth should have gone back to what she knew, like Orpah did. Okay, but she had this commitment. And we've talked about that commitment. She had a commitment to Naomi, yes. And I believe she had a commitment to the Lord God. So Ruth has this attitude. And really, this is going to lead us into a conversation where I'm not sure a lot of people are ready to go. And I'm not saying here, I'm talking in general overall, because we read these stories and think, oh, that's a really, really sweet story. But this is a story that points out really how we're supposed to live out our faith and what that really means. So many people, I'm just going to live by faith and I don't have any responsibility because my faith is mine and I can do what I want to do. Ruth is really showing us something here. That faith is seen in action. Your faith is seen in the way you behave and the attitude that you carry. But we're also seeing another attitude here that we're going to start talking about quite a bit. And it's Boaz's attitude. What's Boaz doing here? What's he doing by what it said here? He's given instruction to his servants, to make sure she's provided for, right? But he also says what?
To leave extra. He's making... Yeah, leave extra hanging out, don't humiliate her.
Right, that's the big thing. It's don't humiliate her. Remember the Levitical law said that they're not supposed to the harvesters aren't supposed to harvest around the edge of the fields so that people could come and gather. But what he's telling her is, out of the stuff you're gathering, take it out and leave stuff for her.
Yeah, right. Drop it on the ground.
Drop it on the ground. Yeah. Now that's a big thing, because he's allowing her. He's not humiliating her. They're not going, oh, here, let us help you. Oh, here, let us do this for you. Or here, he's allowing her the dignity that she has is to work and to, feel like she's contributing to what her family needs are too.
But to give her the best, among the best, not just the,
Well,
outlying stuff, but.
Well, yeah, he's giving her the stuff that he's gonna ultimately gather and sell.
Right.
Yeah, and I agree with that. But he's telling them it says in some translations not to humiliate her, but it says don't rebuke her. In other words, don't make her feel bad for having a need. And that's a huge thing.
He was concerned about just her dignity.
Yes. How many people that you know or that you've encountered that are struggling and are poor, and they almost use it as a weapon. They first off, it's an excuse for not being able to do or not having, and on the same token, they use it as, you got to do something for me because of this. Now Ruth she's out there and she's working hard. She's working as hard as the people that are getting paid to work are working.
Yeah.
And she's doing this just to provide, so they don't have a need. She doesn't want to be a burden. She wants to be sure Naomi's taken care of. Okay, but you're in the field, and I know I'm in a room full of ladies, and I know that I know that ladies have never worked on a construction site or probably worked in a field where you're around a bunch of guys, and guys can be mean and guys can be rude. Guys can be mean and guys can be rude, and they can say all kinds of things. And they can say things like, I can't believe, in just the way that to make somebody feel bad. I can't believe the boss is making us do this, to help this, to leave something for this, they can make her feel bad. And he's really concerned about her dignity. He's concerned about her well-being. I mentioned this term last week, and it's a term that I've mentioned before, but I really want to tell you what it means. It's a term called hesed. And the quick translation for people that they hear this term, and it's the Hebrew term that parallels the term of grace. And I got to tell you, we don't really fully understand either term, to be honest with you. We'll say, I'm blessed, I have grace, and all that, and we kind of have a glimpse of it. Hesed it's often translated as mercy or kindness or compassion or grace, but it's really more than that. It's that attitude and that belief that causes you to act on behalf of someone who is in need. And it involves a love that comes from a loyal commitment to somebody else. It involves that real, that you have a bond, a connection with them. And Hesed inspires these acts of love, these acts of kindness, and these acts of compassion. Hesed is that term is used a lot throughout the Old Testament in referring to God's faithful love toward Israel or toward us. And so that's the same term that's used here when he says don't humiliate her, don't rebuke her. It's really this term of show her that grace, show her that compassion, show her that love, that understanding, and allow her to the dignity to do what she needs to do to provide for her family, for herself. So Ruth did this. She gathered up. It says she gathered grain in the field until evening, and then after gathering grain all day, she had to go and sort it all out, get all the weeds out, get all the bad stuff out, get all the thorns out. And she gathered about 26 quarts of grain. Now, that's a lot.
That would make a lot of bread.
That would make a lot of things, right? Okay. The normal quart weighs about 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds.
It depends on what it is.
Yeah.
Okay. A normal worker, once they're all done and their stuff is, they gather about 2 to 3 pounds worth of grain a day. So you see how the generosity really played off, because we're not saying Ruth was a superwoman here, but she gathered a lot of grain. She gathered what somebody would gather for a day's worth, she gathered 2 weeks worth. That's what was left for her. That's how this kindness that Boaz demonstrated. And
But
go ahead.
don't you think Boaz did that because Naomi was related to him?
Right.
Well, I'm sure that that has something to do with it.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think we're going to see that a little bit more. But I think Boaz could have, just because of the relation, just said, "Hey, just let her gather the grain. Don't leave her be. Don't humiliate her." He didn't have to invite her in. By inviting her to have a meal with them, and inviting her, he's bringing her into the family. Now she's an outsider.
Yeah,
He doesn't have to bring her in. He could have said it at the lunch break where they're all sitting around eating. He could have said, "You go over there. You stay over there where you belong." You
He
know?
was interested in her, no doubt. I mean,
Well, yeah.
Maybe.
Again, we're reading from a different perspective, and if you're trying to go as it progresses, because you know the story, and you know that ultimately they marry, so there's obviously something there.
Well, it could have been the obligation because he's the closest male relative, but I think there was more to that.
Well, but the obligation only required to allow for him to. I'm saying there was more to it because of Boaz in chapter 2, 3 different times refers to God. When he first encounters his servants in the field, "May the Lord bless you."
right.
And when he sees Ruth and they start to have this interaction before they eat, it's "May the Lord reward you for what you've done." So he's obviously a godly man. He obviously there's more going on than just an obligation and an interest. There's something in Boaz's character that's different. There's something in Boaz's nature that is completely different than what the norm is. And that's what's happening. So, picking up in verse 18, it says, "She picked up the grain and went into town where her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. She brought out what she had left over from the meal and gave it to her." So not only did she take all this grain, but they gave her the leftovers from the meal too, the vinegar dip, the stuff that had been prepared. She took all that with her too. So Naomi was very much provided for. It wasn't just, "Here, you got grain, you just got to prepare now for bread and stuff like that." There was more to it. There was a meal that was already prepared for her. Okay, and she gave it to her. Her mother-in-law, Naomi, said to her, "Where did you gather barley today, and where did you work? May the Lord bless the man that noticed you."
So that's the same as Boaz. May the Lord bless the word.
Well-
He greeted the harvesters. May the Lord bless you.
Okay, but don't you think that this, and I understand what you're saying, but don't you think that all of a sudden we see a change in Naomi right here?
Oh, yeah.
Because she came back to town. What was she?
Bitter. Mara.
Yeah, she said, "The Lord's punishing me," basically. Now you're seeing, excuse me, now you're seeing that her hope is restored.
Right.
Okay, it's really, her attitude has really, really, truly changed here. And I don't think it's just a kindness. I think this is a reflection of Naomi's attitude. This is a reflection of seeing God work and acknowledging God's work. I mean, this is really what our faith walk is about. And when we see God do something, man, you want to give Him the honor and the glory that He's doing. This is really the way of doing that. So Ruth told her mother-in-law, just goes on to say that whom she had worked with, and said, "The man I worked with today is Boaz." Well, do you think that brought a little smile to Naomi's face? She knew Boaz. She knew something. All of a sudden, you're starting to see. What are you starting to see? You think back to the start of the story. Elimelech and his family left because of a famine. They went to a foreign place, a place where, let me just say it like this, a place where sin was prevalent. And they immersed themselves in the community for a long time. Okay? Elimelech died, the sons died. Naomi was all of a sudden devastated. She came back, honestly, with her tail between her legs. She came back just hoping that somebody would be here to help her out and take care of her. She knew what Levitical law was, and she understood that widows were going to be provided for in one way or another. And that's why she came back home. But Ruth came with her, and Ruth was devoted to her. Naomi came back hurt and angry, like she would be. She came back grieving, as she would be. But all of a sudden, we're seeing hope restored. She didn't see God's plan at any point in the start of this, or any point through this up to the story. Now, all of a sudden, maybe you're seeing God's plan. It was Boaz. Oh, God does have a plan. God's got my back. God's taking care of me. She is really recognizing, and we're going to find this out by this very next verse, this statement. She is recognizing God's faithfulness. Verse 20 says this: Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May the Lord bless him, because he has not abandoned his kindness to the living or the dead." Naomi continued, the man is a close relative. He is one of our family redeemers. She sees God's faithfulness. She sees part of the plan, and she understands God is protecting her. God is providing for her. Jehovah Jireh is on the job. Okay? Ruth is on the job too. Ruth is doing just what she knows. Understand this. She went out with Naomi's permission. She went out, she worked, and she came home and she continued to serve. She brought out what she had left over from the meal and gave it to her. She continued to serve after working all day. How many people do you know after a hard day's labor, after a long day, they want to just come home and put their feet up?
Well, yeah, they want to.
Okay, how many people do?
Most people.
Most.
Yeah. But not everybody. I mean,
Well,
if you have
Not too many.
but
in this day and age.
I got to tell you, today it's different. I understand what you're saying, Nancy.
Yeah.
I really do, and I agree with you. And that's a sign of our maturity, our character. But in this day, people have even with obligations, they'll ignore their obligations. Oh, I had to work so hard today. Well, how long did you work? Well, I only worked 3 hours, but it was so hard, and I just can't do anything else. I want to play my video games. I want to stream my shows. You know, I want to just whatever. I got to be on Facebook. I wasn't on whatever.
Marilyn makes a point. Interesting. She says the rabbinical writing has Ruth somewhere near 40 and Boaz at 80, having lost his family as well.
Oh.
I think, yeah, that's one of the things that I'd read too. That's a possibility. We don't know for sure, but yeah, it's a very, very much could be a possibility.
And that would be interesting if she were already that age and she hadn't born any children.
Yeah.
You know, that's unusual too.
That's very unusual. I think it's personally because knowing a little bit of the history and culture, I might turn the clock back a little bit. I think Ruth might be closer to 30 and Boaz closer to 60. But that's me. Again, I don't have any foundation for that. That's just the way that I see things like that. And all, but there's nothing that says that, but it very much could be. There could be that kind of difference.
Okay.
What else?
Benita's on, but she can't hear you.
Okay, well, hi, I'll smile. Okay.
We don't have
So-
signer.
Yes.
Here.
I can do this. Okay. So Naomi's told him, told Ruth, this man's a close relative. He's one of our family redeemers. What else does that say? That there's more than one redeemer in the picture here.
Right.
Okay.
What does that actually mean, a family redeemer?
I will get to that in just a second. Let me finish this, and then we're going to talk about what a redeemer really means. Okay?
Because I have a question in the next verse.
That's a great question, and if your question prompts that, then we'll talk about it then. Okay? Ruth the Moabitess said, "He also told me, stay with my young men until they have finished all of my harvest." So again, we're seeing Boaz's heart to protect and provide. Okay, this is again his generosity. This to me is such a parallel to the gospel message, and so many people miss it. They don't see it, but this whole story, this whole Ruth and Boaz story, this whole story of Naomi is such a parallel to the gospel message. And when we get into talking about the kinsman redeemer, we're going to really talk about that. So Naomi said in verse 22, Naomi said to her daughter-in-law Ruth, "My daughter, it is good for you to work with his female servants so that nothing will happen to you in another field." What do you think could be happening to her? Okay, Ruth stayed close to Boaz's female servants, gathered grain until the barley and wheat harvests were finished. And she lived with her mother-in-law. So again, now we're getting more of the picture. We're seeing the provision and the protection, but there's something else going on here that I think we're going to find out about here real quick. Go ahead.
Marilyn writes, "My vision of Ruth is that she is a beautiful and loving woman who meets a handsome guy who is Naomi's family member. Boaz is one of the few men that nothing but good is mentioned about him. I think it is a lovely love story for us to show the depth of love of all kinds, as well as a non-Jew entering the line of David and Jesus."
Well, this to me, the first thing this says is God is the God of all.
Yeah.
And even though God chose Israel, that gets so misunderstood. We think that he chose Israel to get the message of his love out for everybody. Okay, and that's the thing here. So let's talk about this, because we're gonna get into this whole redeemer and this whole kinsman redeemer thing. What is Naomi referred to it in what verse was it? Verse 20 in verse 20, redeemer. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that for a second. What is a kinsman redeemer or a redeemer? Do you guys have any idea?
Yeah.
Do I have an idea?
Go ahead.
It's a close relative that can intercede for the dead relative, and in order to take care of the family, to like get the property and like have a child if they had a child. I don't think kinsman redeemer necessarily has to marry somebody, but just to step in and help them to keep their property.
Okay.
Is that right or wrong?
You're right there.
Okay.
You're close.
Yeah.
I mean,
That was-
it may not all be.
That was basically what I was going to say, that the closest living male relative who could help to take care of those widows or the orphans, whatever, that they would be the one responsible, depending upon the closeness of the family relationship.
Okay. That's a fair point. Okay, part of what we have to understand again is the history of the time this was written and the culture. what was the big issue during this time for the Jews? It was the land that they had been given.
Keeping it, holding it.
Because remember, Joshua had brought them over the Jordan. He had brought them to the promised land, and then he had spent a big part of his life dividing the land by tribes and assigning each area for the tribes to live in. It was important for the tribes, the people of that tribe, to go to that area and establish their towns, stake out their land. Why? Because that's how they were going to provide for themselves. That's how they were going to be able to live and everything else. So land was the important thing.
And that had to do with, the year of Jubilee had to do with that too.
Well, that's
if they lost their land or
yes,
sold it, they could get it back.
Okay, but I don't know that we've gotten to the year of Jubilee yet. But
no.
Okay, I understand what you're saying though. But here's the thing: land was important, but land was passed down from father to son,
right?
Not from father to daughter, not from father to cousin,
or even man to wife.
Yeah. So if the husband died and there was no son, the land was forfeit. Somebody else could come claim it. You think?
And the woman would be left.
And the woman would be out.
Mm-hmm.
She would be poor.
She'd have to go to other family members for help.
Yeah. Now this is the time, remember I told you that Ruth was written in the time of Judges. What was going on during the time of Judges? Israel would get it right for a little while, they'd worship God and everything would be okay, and then there'd have to be somebody come up because Israel had got it wrong and they were fighting somebody. And when they're fighting somebody, people are dying. We don't know why Elimelech and his sons died. It could have been because of war. It doesn't say that in here. I'm just saying it could have been. But this is what happens, and there's nobody to inherit the land that is rightfully Naomi's because of her marriage, and there's nobody to work the land. So you need somebody to restore that, to redeem that. A kinsman redeemer is a relative who has a responsibility. Okay, his responsibility is to help out a relative who's in need, who's in a bad situation. Okay? Now, this includes some of the things that happened back in this day is somebody got poor or somebody got into debt and they could sell themselves into slavery to try and... So what happens with the debt? The land, again, could be forfeit. Okay? It could be that they sold their property, again, because of debt. The kinsman redeemer is a person who could go back and make it right. Solve the debt, resolve the debt, and reacquire the property. It's also about getting restitution. If somebody was wronged, if something was stolen or taken or somebody was harmed, this redeemer got restitution. Even if the person was killed or murdered, he could not only avenge the death, but he would get, according to the law, restitution for the death. He could gain that. Also, another role of a kinsman redeemer. Now you got to remember, okay, you got to remember that polygamy was a thing back then. Okay, it wasn't out of the realm of possibility. I mean, come on, the wisest man on earth had a lot of wives and a lot of concubines. Okay, so this was a thing back then. Also, a kinsman redeemer had the responsibility to marry a widow for the purpose of having a son. Again, you've got the parallel here. For the purpose of having a son in the name of the husband, the father, so the land could be passed down. So the family would be taken care of. Okay, a kinsman redeemer restores the rights of the one who suffered the loss. That's the big thing. This redemption is so huge. It's the same thing that Christ, think about this, it's the same thing that Christ does for us when we say we're redeemed. He's restoring everything that we've lost because of our sin, because of what's broke our relationship with God. And what he did put us back in a place where we could have the right relationship with God and all the rights and benefits that come from that. Wow. This is powerful. This is something incredible. Okay, so we're going to see, because now that God's plan is coming to Naomi and she's starting to see God's faithfulness and see that what God's lining up here, she's again got hope. She is going to actually start to rejoice and understand that God's protecting her. Well, Naomi's going to slip from the role from a mother-in-law to the role of a mentor for Ruth here. She's going to give her some instruction that's going to really help her out. Okay? This is stuff that I don't know that Ruth would fully understand, because, again, she was a Moabite. Okay, so she wouldn't fully understand this because, again, she was married. She married into the family, and, well, there would have been a lot of this. She would have learned a lot of the history and things like that, but these are things that she wouldn't understand. These are some of the intricacies of the Levitical law. So in chapter 3, we see this. We see Ruth's mother-in-law Naomi said to her, and here we go. Here we're stepping into this role where she's going to start to give her some instruction. My daughter, shouldn't I find rest for you so that you will be taken care of? Remember when else Naomi talked to Ruth about rest? And do we understand what that rest really is? Way back at the start, remember when everybody had died? Naomi told her and Orpah, go home and find rest. What that term really means is find a settled home where you can have that security, that resting place, that place where you're going to be taken care of. And now Naomi's saying, my daughter, shouldn't I find rest? Shouldn't I find a settled home for you so that you're going to be taken care of? She goes on to say, now, isn't Boaz our relative? Haven't you been working with his female servants? This evening he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. So she's knowing, Naomi understands the process here. And she's going to prepare Ruth for something that I hope we're going to fully understand. Naomi understands this kinsman redeemer thing. I think we do too, because we can see Christ in this. So she says he's going to be winnowing on the floor. Why would he be winnowing? He's the master. Why wouldn't his servants be there? Winnowing is, what winnowing is? It's taking all the harvest and really with like a pitchfork, throwing up in the air and allowing the grain to settle and the chaff, all the weeds, blow away.
Glad you told us that. I was wondering what winnowing was.
Winnowing is hard work.
Yes, sounds like
it's the same thing as this gleaning that they talked about that Ruth did after she worked in the field. She had to go out there and sort everything out. Well, the way they did it, he had all his servants bring all this stuff to this threshing floor, and you can see the threshing floor is a place like this. It's without all the tables in here. It's just a flat floor where there's tools and stuff to really separate the weeds, separate the chaff. If you want to think of it this way, it's a place to separate the sin from the good stuff. Okay, but here is the master, and he's in there winnowing. Why is he doing that? Can I tell you? He's protecting his investment. That's part of his responsibility. So he's in there, and I'm sure it's not just him. I'm sure there's servants in there, but it sounds like Boaz is one of these guys that rolls up his sleeves too and gets involved. So he's in there, and they're winnowing. And so Naomi knows where she's going to be. So she tells Ruth this. Verse 3 says this, wash, put on perfumed oil, and wear your best clothes. Go down to the threshing floor, but don't let the man know that you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, notice the place where he's lying. Go in and uncover his feet and lie down. Then he will explain to you what to do. Let's talk about this. Okay? Let's talk about this. First, Naomi's example is this example that Paul talks about older women. And when he writes to Titus, he says, in the same way, older women are to be reverent in behavior, not slanderers, not slaves to excessive drinking. They are to teach what is good, so that they may encourage young women to love their husbands and to control their children. Okay? That's what Naomi's doing here. Now, it sounds like she's setting her up for something, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, if Hollywood had this and had the movie, you'd be hearing, bow chicka bow bow. I mean, come on, right? Right? They're thinking, oh yeah, you. That's not what this is about at all. First, what Naomi is telling her is you present yourself to this man as best you can. Okay? Now this thing about going when he lies down. Well, wait. First she's saying let him eat. Let him do his job and eat. And then he's going to go down. He's going to rest. And this is when you present yourself to him. Now people, and I've read commentaries on this, and people say, well, Naomi's telling her to be immoral, and she's telling her to go have sex with him, so then he's obligated. Now, there are, and I know you're looking at that, but there are commentators that will talk about that and say that this is what she's saying. This is not the case. Okay? What she's saying is when he lies down, notice where he's lying, go and uncover his feet and lie down. Then he will explain to you everything. By uncovering his feet and lying at his feet and then really literally pulling the covers over her, this is an act of complete submission. By pulling his covers over her, really what Ruth is doing is, honestly, I got to say it this way, she's proposing to him.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was thinking, is that she was making herself available, but not in a sexual way.
But people will draw that from the previous conclusion.
Because people...
So we need to talk about it. That's all I'm saying. This is an act of complete submission. This is an act of really what she's doing is presenting herself and offering herself to him as a wife.
Yeah.
Okay? It's a request by pulling the covers over. It's a request for his protection. It's a request for his covering. Okay? So this is what's going to happen. This hasn't happened yet, but this is what Naomi's telling her to do. Ruth says this in verse 5. Ruth said to her, I will do everything you say. She went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law had charged her to do. After Boaz ate, drank, and was in good spirits, he went to lie down at the end of the pile of barley. She came secretly and uncovered his feet and lay down. Okay, so she did exactly what she was told. What does that say? What does this say about Ruth?
She's obedient.
Yeah.
She trusted Naomi.
Obedient trust. Again, she could have said, nah, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
You gotta be kidding.
Are you kidding me? I've been out in the field all day.
But she knows that...
And I got a headache.
That she knows that if she knows that she does this, it's not just going to help her, it's going to help her mother-in-law as well.
But she doesn't know. She doesn't know that at all.
Well,
She doesn't know.
She does.
I don't think she does at all. She doesn't know what Boaz is going to say.
No, but I'm saying-
Boaz could have completely rejected her.
No, but I'm saying that if Boaz does accept her, it's not just going to benefit her, it's going to benefit her mother-in-law.
Yes, I understand that.
She cares about her mother-in-law.
I agree, but here's the thing. Here's the other thing that you're missing in this then. I understand that Ruth cares about Naomi. She loves Naomi deeply. But Naomi's taken care of no matter what. There are other redeemers there. There are other redeemers.
Yeah. Okay.
This man is a close relative. He is one of our family redeemers. There are other redeemers. Naomi's, by Levitical law, is going to be taken care of. Ruth doesn't have to be.
Yeah, okay.
Okay? And Nancy, I'm not saying you're wrong here, but I'm saying we got to open up and understand that Ruth is really putting herself at risk, but she's making a willing choice. She's cooperating with what Naomi's instructing her. She's cooperating with his teaching. She's trusting Naomi and being obedient. But you know what? By what else? Who else is she trusting by doing this? Trusting God. Also trusting Boaz because she's seen something in him. Okay? At midnight, Boaz was startled, turned over, and there, lying at his feet, was a woman. Okay? Now, it's not like here. It's not like we're living here where you got lights all over the place, even when it's dark. It would have been dark on that threshing floor. It would have been dark. And Boaz didn't know what's going on. After all, he'd been drinking a little. He was in a good mood, it said. He'd had a glass or two of wine. Okay? So he was relaxed. He says, "Who are you?" Legitimate question, right? Fair question. Me, I probably would have kicked it like it was a dog. What the heck? Get out of here. You're bothering me.
Thought it was some animal.
Thought it was some animal or something, but Boaz asked a legitimate question. She says, "I am Ruth, your servant." And then here we go. Here's the proposal once again, not in action, but in word. "Take me under your wing, for you are a family redeemer." What she's doing right now is she's offering herself. What she's really saying is, "Where's the ring, buddy?" Okay? That's really, and she's doing it in a very nice way. I'm trying to be a little bit light here because this is very serious. But she's saying, "Protect me. Put me under your protection. Put me under your provision." Then he said, now here we go again. Boaz and his character. Verse 10, then he said, "May the Lord bless you, my daughter." So where's the first reference?
Back to the Lord.
Yeah.
This tells his heart. This tells what his focus is. This tells what his character and his person are. And then he acknowledges Ruth and her actions. He says this, "You have shown more kindness now than before, because you have not pursued younger men, whether rich or poor." What's Boaz telling her? Hey, you could have had anybody out here. You could have picked anybody. There are people out there that would have taken you because obviously, again, we've all referred to this in one way or another. Ruth was beautiful. And she was attractive. And somebody would have taken her. She could have pursued a younger guy to try and get in and have a family with him and all that. But Ruth saw something in Boaz, just as Boaz saw something in her. Verse 11 says, "Now don't be afraid, my daughter. I will do for you whatever you say, since all the people in my town know that you are a woman of noble character." Powerful statement. What does that mean? It means her character has spoken.
Yeah.
It's not that she has to get out there and get up in front of everybody and give her spiel and tell everything about herself. They've watched her. There has been a period of time here. There's obviously been more interactions between her and Boaz in the fields and wherever else, and Ruth has been watched. Her actions have testified. Something we talk about all the time in our group here. It's your faith speaks in just the way you live if your focus is right. If your focus is on honoring God, on being obedient, on understanding that, you know what, it's Christ first and Christ always, that's going to speak in just the way you live. And then Boaz goes on in this honorable moment to prove how honorable he is. Because he said, oh yeah, we'll do this. Okay? But he says in verse 12, yes, it's true, I am a family redeemer. But there is a redeemer closer than I. And then he goes on to say, stay here tonight, and in the morning, if he wants to redeem you, that's good. Let him redeem you. But if he doesn't want to redeem you, as the Lord lives, so he's making this promise in front of God, I will. Now lie down until morning. So, again, he understands exactly what's going on. He understands the offer that Ruth is making. He understands his role in all of this. But he says, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. I'm going to do this in a way that's going to honor God. But he continues to, even in this, he could have said, go home. He could have said, get out of here until I work out the details. He continues to protect her. So it says in verse 14, and this is where, to me, it gets so significant. So she lay down at his feet until morning, but got up while it was still dark. Then Boaz said, don't let it be known that a woman came to the threshing floor. And he told Ruth. Now, we don't know who Boaz was talking to. He could have been talking to his servants. Could have been talking to Ruth, too. He could have been just said, don't say anything. We don't know. We're not sure who he's talking to here. But I'm sure Boaz wasn't the only one there. But then, and he told Ruth, bring the shawl you're wearing and hold it out. When she held it out, he shoveled 6 measures of barley into her shawl. And she went to town. So he was still concerned enough that even if the guy wasn't going to redeem her, that she was provided for.
Yeah.
Whether the guy redeemed her or not, Boaz made sure that she and Naomi were provided for.
Well, maybe that's why Naomi had told Ruth to do that in the first place, because she knew there was a closer kinsman redeemer, but he might not have been somebody she would have wanted Ruth to be with. Maybe he wasn't such a nice guy.
That's a fair speculation. That's a fair speculation. But I just think that I think what Naomi saw was God's providence, because she didn't say, "Hey, go to Boaz's field," when she sent him out. But when she told Ruth go ahead and go out and gather, and Ruth ended up in Boaz's field, all of a sudden she's starting to see God's providence in here. Okay, and God's protection here. But yeah, you could be right in that. Verse 16, she went to her mother-in-law Naomi, who asked, "What happened, my daughter?" Then Ruth told her everything the man had done. She said, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley because he said, 'Don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" Naomi said, "Wait here until you find out how things go, for he won't rest until he resolves this today." So she knows a little bit more about Boaz. We're going to get into the resolving and the last part of this next week, because this is powerful. But again, we need to understand, again, this is such a parallel to the way that we're redeemed. We're redeemed by, if you'll allow me to use the term, we're redeemed by this chesed, this loyal love that sees that we have a need that we can't meet ourselves, and it is met through our relationship with Christ. And Christ does all the work, and then he continues to provide. Even when he's making it right, he continues to provide. Powerful story of redemption. So we'll pick up and finish off Ruth probably next week, and then we'll get into Esther. Anything else that I missed or I just spoke over?
Marilyn just says Boaz is faithful and noble no matter what his age is.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Let me pray for us, and we will wrap this up.
If you want.
All right. Father, we just thank you for tonight, for your words, for your provision, for your hesed, for your grace, your loyal love for us. And may we learn to just live in the fullness of that love, and then be people who are obedient and share that love with others, with everybody we come in contact with. Father, please guide us and protect us. Speak to us. And we'll be careful to give you all the praise and glory that you're due. This we pray in your name. Amen.